Let's then turn to winter and invite Barbara to address us on her paper.
To promote a discussion about winter with the board and to give reassurance for our plans to manage the winter. None of us should underestimate the challenges the NHS faces in the winter period compared to the summer months, and we expect this winter to be particularly difficult because we know that the NHS is already stretched. More patients get treated, people are living longer, there's more that we can do for those patients, and in time of economic restraint we have to be extremely efficient in order to maintain the high level of service that we want to. There's been a great deal of media interest in winter, a great deal of it very negative, and whilst I wouldn't want in any way to underestimate the challenge we face, I also think that it's absolutely important that everyone understands the amount of effort that goes in across the NHS to plan and prepare for winter. Something we've done for years and years and years, and this winter we've redoubled our efforts and we have to be particularly vigilant, and that planning goes on within our individual hospitals, within our individual GP surgeries, across communities and across the wider systems. The accident and emergency departments always are a focus of attention, and that's because they tend to be the pressure point of winter. When the system is not running as efficiently and as effectively as it could, we tend to see the problems in our A&E departments with patients having to wait too long. I remind people about the standard of everyone being treated, having their completed episode in A&E within 4 hours. Again, I think some people think it's about you wait 4 hours to be seen, which it most certainly isn't. It's about after the end of 4 hours, you are either discharged if you don't need any further treatment, or you will have left A&E and been admitted to hospital. And again, I think that there is, in some instances, people think that the patients who are being discharged are the ones who often wait more than 4 hours, and that's not actually the case, although that does happen. The biggest difficulty we have and why the A&E standard is such a good barometer for us is that the patients who tend to have to wait longer than 4 hours are those patients who are sick and who are waiting for a bed, which makes it all the more unacceptable, but actually makes it's so evident that this is a feature of a wider of a system issue and an issue within the hospital. And whilst there aren't actually more patients attending A&E or being admitted to hospital this year than there were this time last year, it would appear that the patients who are admitted are more ill, and that there is more difficulty in supporting these patients to be discharged. And often what we see in A&E is simply a feature of the fact that our hospitals aren't able to empty their beds to find patients, to help patients back into the community, which is where, of course, patients need to be. So therefore, our efforts in planning for the winter, whilst what happens within the hospital and within the A&E department itself are key and critical, it is equally essential that we put in place all those things which will mean that patients don't need to go to hospital if they don't need to be admitted, and similarly they can be discharged as soon as they're ready to go home. And often that's not a feature just of the services the NHS can put in place, but critically the social services, social care services which are available to them. We monitor the A&E standard on a weekly basis, and in order to identify how things are going. And I'm pleased to report that we've seen improvement in that standard over the last week, with the majority of places being able to treat patients quickly and efficiently. We've got a number of strands to the things that we're doing in order to keep us prepared for winter and make sure that we can maintain this standard. Key and critical is what's going on locally. We all know that that's what makes a difference for patients, what their local services are like, and that it's local clinicians and managers and patients and the public supporting them that can make the difference, not necessarily the things we do nationally. We've got urgent care working groups with their winter plans. these are on a day-to-day basis identifying what needs to change to make the service more efficient. And as we move into the winter, I would expect that these groups will become much more operational, much more able on a week-to-week basis to make sure that the right capacity is in the right place for patients. We've also got a lot of activity going on at national level. Obviously, the paper describes the additional funding that's gone to the health communities that we thought would have the biggest struggles. There's a lot of work going on across ourselves and local government and the NHS Trust Development Organisation and Monitor, the two organisations that oversee hospitals, in order that we look at the urgent care plans and we look at the places where there are hotspots on a weekly basis. We focus on which hospitals are having the most problems. We focus on the urgent care plans for those places and make sure that they've looked at everything they could do to support that hospital to deliver timely services for patients. The vast majority of the urgent care plans are excellent. I have some concerns that some of them are a little inwardly focused, and what we will be doing is encouraging the CCGs and the local providers to make sure that they are working with the ambulance trusts, who have a major part to play, and the independent sector and the voluntary sector, who can often be really important for helping patients during the winter. But nationally, our attention to that focus on how individual health economies are doing is significant. But also, we have a major role to play nationally in terms of understanding what's going on. So the paper describes the sit reps, the situations that we now have in place, which give us a really granular view of what's happening across the system, and also allow us to meet surges of demand where it changes geographically, make sure that particularly for those services which are for very small numbers of patients, paediatric intensive care beds, ECMO beds, that we can flex and make those available to patients across different parts of the country, as there are different issues in different places. Another major issue for dealing with the winter will be the 111 service, and I've used this opportunity to just report to the board that 111 continues to deliver a good service for patients. It continues to meet the standards that we're expecting in terms of answering calls and passing patients on to clinicians to be treated. We continue to get very high levels of patient satisfaction. I think we all hear anecdotes now of patients who have called 111 and are very pleased with the service. Sadly, it doesn't seem to be reflected in media coverage of 111, given the negative coverage that it had initially. But nonetheless, again, even with 111, we're pleased with the progress we've made, but that doesn't mean that we don't have to be extremely vigilant, because 111 will become more busy over the winter, and I hope will be play a major part in supporting us through that time. The paper describes the changes that we're seeing because NHS Direct is leaving the market of 111. Already we've had a number of transfers to new providers, dominantly ambulance trusts, the North West and Somerset have already gone live, and the transfer to those ambulance trusts, and over the next few weeks we will see significantly more transfers. We're also seeing new services in 111 and extensions of services coming through all the time. What I can reassure the board is that our oversight of that process is very significant indeed and really robust, including asking the CCG's commissioners to provide us with external assurance that the new providers are able to take on the service and not have a dip in performance. The ones where we have seen a transfer, there has been no dip in performance, which is very reassuring, but we will continue to oversee that. And in fact, last week I was party to a decision not to stand up a new provider because we thought that we didn't have the assurance that they were ready, and we therefore made alternative arrangements. And then finally, just to say that what will be important for us, I think, over the winter will be getting the right communications campaign with public and the media. And I think there are three strands to the campaign for us. The first one is communicating with the public about what they can do to keep themselves well, what they can do so that they don't need NHS services over the winter, and also where they can get those services and what's the easiest route for them to find an NHS service if they need one. So that'll be one important part. It will include NHS England doing a significant media campaign about how people can keep well in winter, and obviously that will be tied in with the flu campaign. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of flu vaccination at this time, both for our own staff, where you remember we have a big campaign, but also for those patients who are eligible. And it's good to report that the latest figures show that already significantly more than half of the patients over 65 who are eligible for a flu injection have had one, and a third of patients with long-term conditions, and we're seeing good progress in the other categories, pregnant women and children in their flu vaccination. So as well as and also as well as the campaign for the how to keep well, we obviously will be supporting the Winter Heroes campaign, making sure, because often in the winter it's isolation and the elderly patients who haven't got anybody to turn to help them with simple things in the winter, which leads to a deterioration in health. So we will be supporting that Winter Heroes campaign. The second part of our campaign will actually be to tell people what's happening, to make sure that people really do understand the facts about what's going on in A&E departments and what's going on winter services, because sometimes some of the media have a tendency to exaggerate the negative, so we need to make sure that the public aren't unreasonably frightened or cause concern where that isn't necessary, but we need to be scrupulously honest and be very clear where there are problems and issues, but for the most part we can say that where our services are working well, and to keep the public reassured of all the things we are doing, all the planning things that we're doing to keep the service safe. And the final part will be about helping the public to understand the future, looking forward, based on Sir Bruce's urgent care review, and how we see as the years go by that we will be able to continue to provide this vitally important urgent care service. And Bruce, you might want, on that basis, just to pick up on your urgent care review.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. I think to put it in context, despite some occasional and obvious problems, I think we should be very proud of our NHS and the social values that underpin it and that it represents. No more so, I think, than when somebody needs urgent care, when they're frightened, when they're anxious, when they're in physical or mental pain. And we've got many examples of how this is delivered really well, effectively and efficiently around our NHS. But it's strange that the emergency care system at a national level hasn't been systematically reviewed since the early 1970s. And yet, despite that, in that time, science and technology have advanced. They've had a major impact on society, a major impact on healthcare, and a major impact on the way we run our daily lives. And I think this provides us with a whole lot of new opportunities for providing a better urgent and emergency care system for the citizens of this country, particularly at a time, as you've heard from Barbara, that our accident and emergency departments are under stress. And that stress does not originate in the accident and emergency departments, who, frankly, you could argue are victims of their own success. They provide a very good service, in my view, but the problems of the totality of the urgent and emergency care system are manifest in those departments. So I was asked by the Secretary of State to undertake a review of the urgent and emergency care system, and that's been led by one of my colleagues, Professor Keith Willett, a Professor of Trauma and Orthopaedics in Oxford. And he and his team have reviewed the evidence, and they've debated that evidence in equal measure with patients and with those who deliver the service, who live and breathe the problems of the urgent and emergency care service on a day-to-day basis. And the result of that is that next week we will be publishing a vision for where we think the service could move over the course of the next few years to provide better care for people in different circumstances, and where possible, better care much closer to home than is often the case at the moment. This is not going to be a detailed implementation plan. That will follow and be led, I hope, by a public debate, which we will share with people on NHS choices and in the wider media, who, in my view, have been extremely helpful in terms of enabling us to have an honest and coherent debate about the provision of 7-day services in our NHS, and I hope that they can do the same with helping us to redesign and redevelop our urgent and emergency care services. So that'll be published next week, and that'll be followed in 3 or 4 weeks by a letter to the chairman of the board on the deliberations of a 7-day services forum, which I've been leading, and which will hopefully start to kickstart 7-day services in our National Health Service, but focusing in particular in the first instance on urgent and emergency care. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you, Barbara. Let's just reflect on some of the messages we've just heard. I mean, the issue of winter is clearly one where the board wants assurance that the system as a whole will work well together and that it will best serve the interests of patients. But the way in which we're organising this bears all the hallmarks of past experience. I'm really interested to know, or to try to explore with you, if you were reorganising this now around the role of NHS England as a commissioning agency, how would you imagine this might look like in, say, 3 years' time? Would it look the same? Would we still be doing the same oversight and meticulous planning and working closely across the country with all these networks? Or would we have released more autonomy and more authority to providers and to CCGs, and to been able to step back a little, confident that our commissioning decisions had accurately allocated resources to where they were needed, and that the system could work well without our meticulous and concentrated oversight?
We certainly would see a very different system whereby local commissioners and providers, overseen by the health and wellbeing boards and with the urgent care working groups, were much more able to take full responsibility for ensuring that the plans were right in their own area. And I would think that hopefully by that time, through the allocations process, we would be able to secure the funds for them at the beginning of the year, and that they wouldn't be dependent on waiting to see whether centrally we had more funds to allocate for winter. So I think there would be a very significant benefit in that. And I do think that once we've got the standards and more clear guidance, and CCGs have become more mature organisations, working with their partners, obviously, then I think we will see a situation where hopefully locally they can ensure that they get the right results. I think there will always be a place, however, for NHS England working with its partners to do two things. One is to ensure that we do collect the information and that we are clear what is happening, and therefore through our national voice are able to reassure patients and the public, as well as the local reassurance that we would expect CCGs to be giving to their patients, that these services are safe and effective. And I think that there will always be certain services which are delivered to a very small number of patients and which are very specialised, where it will still be important that we just keep the national oversight, because actually, in terms of things like paediatric intensive care beds and ECMO beds and things, I think that one has to have a national perspective. What's important, of course, is making sure that we have the right perspective for each level, because some of these things will be done regionally, some of these things will be done across several CCGs, and then a small number at national level. But certainly, yes, I hope that that we don't have to keep, put in the huge amount of effort that we have done at the moment, overseeing the plans that are coming up from the front line, and we'll be able to be confident that they'll be able to do these things for themselves.
Thank you. Could we invite other contributions from the board? Kieran?
Maybe it's a version of the same thing. If we just take the short term and next year, do we have to do the same thing? Do we have to throw another 250 million at things? How do we institutionalise things so it's much more business as usual?
Well, the NHS has always had extra money for winter. And in a way that itself causes some issues, because the fact that they always have seen money for winters coming down means that they plan on that basis. And I'm sure we would all absolutely agree that if we could be much more overt at the beginning of the year, and everybody was very much more clear about what they could put in place for winter and start planning sooner, that would be even better. What we have done this year, the government has committed this year not only to the 250 million that we got this year additional funding, which it gave to NHS England to distribute to the front line for winter, but that we have that commitment that 250 million will be available next winter as well. And in fact, we have been able to get that money out to the front line more swiftly than in the past, because often it has taken until to December for us to be able to identify that we have spare funding. So certainly for those who have received the funding, they're grateful that they've got more time to put their plans in place. But as I said before, I think in the ideal world, there wouldn't be this cycle. People would be very clear that they had the funds, and we would be more confident the funds were appropriately allocated in the first instance. I know we're talking about allocations later on, and that people would then take the responsibility on themselves to make sure their communities got the services.
Thank you. Right, well, thank you both, Barbara and Bruce, and we look forward to hearing more about the urgent and emergency care review at a future meeting.